Thank you for inviting me, and you certainly don't need to apologise for being 2 minutes late. I think I was 2 minutes late, actually, so I'm very pleased to be here. And I do want to refer particularly to the work of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Faith and Society, which, as you say, I chair, and specifically about the Keeping the Faith report, which we published in the middle, just before the middle of the pandemic. So the Parliamentary Group is a cross-party group of MPs who want to celebrate the very positive contributions to communities being made by faith-based organisations. We want to make those contributions better known, and where we can, we want to help remove hurdles which sometimes stop them realising their full potential. The group was set up 10 years ago this year. We started off with a series of meetings with faith-based groups. One meeting about welfare to work, a second one about health and well-being, one on work with young people, recognising that most youth work in Britain today is carried out by faith groups, and the last in the series with groups working on international aid. And it quickly became clear from those discussions that the groups often had a problem with their local council. There was suspicion in the council that faith groups were only really interested in trying to convert people, or that any service they provided would be biased in favour of their own members. And in any case, from the perspective of a hard-pressed council officer, faith groups are difficult to deal with. If you work with one, are you going to offend others? And after all, these are rather odd people. They all believe in God. Far simpler not to get involved with any of them. But as a result, communities miss out on really valuable contributions that the groups could be making. And we came up with the idea, and actually it was suggested by my colleague David Lammy, now the Shadow Foreign Secretary, the idea of what we call a faith covenant. It sets out ground rules for cooperation between faith groups and local councils to make clear what each should expect of the other, to build up confidence and trust on both sides, and support them to work together for the common good. It's set out on our APPG website, but different areas are encouraged to develop their own versions if local circumstances warrant it. The first council to draw faith groups in its area together to sign up to the covenant was the City of Birmingham at its central library in December 2014. Birmingham's the largest local authority in Europe, so that was a very good start for us. And since then, another dozen or so have signed up, covering between them, we think, about 10% of the UK population. And Faith Action, which is the secretariat to the All-Party Group, is increasingly drawing those authorities and the faith groups in them together to network and learn from each other. But the pandemic has really seen things move to a different level. It came home to me that something unusual was happening on Good Friday morning 2 years ago. When the first lockdown came, the jobs of many of my constituents in East London came to an end. Many families where the parent was working legally and working very hard have the no recourse to public funds condition attached to their visa status. So when their jobs ended, they couldn't get any income from that anymore. They couldn't claim benefit either. All means to obtain an income came to an end. So sitting at home that Good Friday morning, I found 2 different emails from different constituents saying, I don't have any money to buy food. What should I do? We've all become very familiar with referring people to food banks over the past 10 years or so, but I thought that they were all going to be shut over the Easter weekend, so I didn't know how to reply. But then scrolling further through my inbox, I found another email from the Mayor of Newham, Roxana Fiaz. And her email said, if you come across people without food over the holiday weekend, you should email the Vicar of Ascension Church. If you email him before 10 in the morning, a food parcel will be delivered before 6 p.m. in the evening. Well, I was rather skeptical about that, but I didn't have any better ideas. So I decided I'd give it a try. And both my constituents got their food parcels before 6 p.m. that day. Now, my local council has never worked with faith groups like that before. In the past, there's been, an exchange of pleasantries and meetings at community events, and that was about it. It was clear to me 2 years ago something unusual was going on in our area, but also across the countries, because councils have had to depend on churches, mosques, temples, synagogues in a way we've never seen before. And over the summer of 2020, with support from the Sir Halley Stewart Trust, Trussell Trust and the Good Faith Partnership, we commissioned Professor Chris Baker and his team at the Faiths and Civil Society Unit of Goldsmiths, University of London, to research these council faith group partnerships. They sent a questionnaire to all 408 local councils in the UK. Nearly half the councils, 48%, completed the questionnaire and returned it. And the report from that research, Keeping the Faith, was published in November 2020. I was very pleased with the job that the researchers did, not just with the questionnaire, but through a series of interviews, particularly with local authority leaders after the questionnaires had come in. You can find that report on the website of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Faith and Society. It's in the news section in an item from the 12th of November 2020, the publication date of the report. And the findings strongly backed the anecdotal evidence that faith groups and faith-based organisations were key to the civil society response to the pandemic, opening up their buildings, running food banks, sharing information, befriending, collecting, cooking and delivering food, providing volunteers. It has been a remarkable demonstration of partnerships for the common good. I know quite a few people who wrongly, in my view, have been uncomfortable about faith group participation in public life, but I don't know anybody who would deny that those partnerships have served the common good in an extraordinarily difficult period and served it with warm-hearted goodwill. So 59% of the councils submitting their questionnaires reported that they'd been working with church-based food banks, 24% had been working with mosque-based food banks, 11% with food banks based in gurdwaras, 10% with food banks based in Hindu temples. Larger proportions still had been working with faith groups to collect food or financial donations, to cook and deliver meals, recruit volunteers for council programs, share information to their members. For example, 23% of the councils said that they'd worked with Jewish groups, 18% had worked with Buddhist groups to share information with their members. And, there's a widespread view that religious faith is declining. In fact, over these past 2 years, there has been an absolute dependence on faith groups of a kind we've never seen before in communities all over the country. And I think there are very important lessons in that experience about where in Britain in the 2020s we can find resources to build the common good and change things for the better. It seems to me, and I know this will be uncomfortable for some, but it seems to me that faith groups offer by far the best opportunity. A very striking finding in the report is not just that all these collaborations were set up, but also that they proved a very positive experience for the local authorities involved. And council officers were often quite surprised about that. One of them told the researcher, and I quote, "My personal admiration for faith groups has gone through the roof just in terms of their commitment there. We as a local authority didn't know what we were getting into. They've got involved with smiles on their faces and they've done it professionally." End of quote. Over 2/3 of the local authorities reported that there had been an increase in partnership working with faith groups since the start of the pandemic. That proportion was 58% in areas of low religious diversity. So in those areas, it was well over half. But in areas of high religious diversity, it was 82%. 91% described their experience of partnership with faith groups as either very positive or positive. 76% expected that new partnerships with faith groups during the pandemic would continue afterwards. The research team had, as I mentioned, some in-depth discussions about their experience with local authority chief executives, and this point about the professionalism of the faith groups they had worked with was a striking theme of what many of them said. And I hope all of this is going to lead to a change of attitude in central and local government to the contributions that faith groups can be making. The survey asked the councils to characterise their experience of partnership working with faith groups and faith-based organisations during the pandemic. 61%, big proportion, 61% said it was very positive, 30% said it was positive. None of them said it was negative. The authorities were asked more detailed questions about their experience. They were asked about positive features. Did the faith groups add value because of their long-standing presence in the local community? 60% said yes, to a great extent. Another 28% said yes to some extent, so 88% altogether. Clear majorities said the faith groups provided a pool of volunteer resources. They provided improved access to hard-to-reach groups. 40% said that was the case to a great extent. Another 39% to some extent, so 79% altogether said the faith groups improved access to groups that were otherwise hard to reach. A majority said that they acted as a source of local leadership and that they articulated and promoted promising positive values for social transformation. The authorities were also asked about negative aspects, sometimes said to characterise working with faith groups. For example, they were asked whether they were worried about the possibility of proselytization in the context of partnership working. The proportion of respondents saying that was a feature to a great extent was 1%. The proportion of saying it was a feature to some extent was a further 2%, a total of 3%. So these great anxieties, which have been widely canvassed and which certainly could cause a problem, have in reality barely serviced at all over the past 2 years. And the report says this, I'm quoting, "A recurring motif that emerges from both sides is the sense of admiration and respect for each other's work in response to an immediate crisis and its immediate aftermath. One council lead reflects, quote, I'm not a person of faith, but I've been incredibly inspired by a lot of the faith activism in my area." So after the report was published in November 2020, in February last year, I led an adjournment debate in the House of Commons on the report. The Minister, Eddie Hughes, commended the report. He said that it, quote, shone a bright light on what can be achieved locally between faith groups and local government, and it shows what can happen, quote, when faith communities and local and national government can work together effectively. Later on, I met with Lord Stephen Greenhouse, who at the time held the faith brief at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. He particularly liked the report's proposal that there should be a faiths commissioner appointed by the government to promote and champion faith groups' collaborations with local authorities. Now, the faiths brief has been passed on to Kemi Badenoch. Now, I don't yet know whether she shares Lord Greenhouse's enthusiasm for such a post. I think Colin Bloom's review of how the government should engage with faith groups in England may well have something to say on this as well. It was supposed to be published last summer. We're still waiting for it. We're told it's imminent now. We'll have to see where we end up when that report is published. But in the meantime, I do welcome the announcement of the government's Faith New Deal pilot fund that was launched in September. Faith groups were invited to apply for grants for projects to foster good relations within local communities, and we're waiting now for the decisions on those applications. Lord Greenhouse wrote to me just before the launch of that fund that the findings from Keeping the Faith, quote, show that faith groups can provide innovative solutions to complex problems. He's absolutely right about that. The department's press release announcing the launch of the fund mentioned the influence of the Keeping the Faith report in its development. So, my guess is that everyone on this call will be familiar with the widely held view that religious faith is on the way out, that it's at best irrelevant or more likely harmful to community well-being. I believe that view is profoundly wrong, and we've seen how wrong it is over these last 2 extraordinary years. In reality, in modern Britain, religious faith is our best resource for bringing large numbers of people together, building the bonds between them, building the common good. And the need for that building is greater than ever. The Keeping the Faith report was published, as I said, in November 2020. A follow-up report based on a further set of in-depth interviews, mainly with faith group representatives, is going to be published after Easter, with, again, Professor Chris Baker's team leading on its production. And that will contain some further recommendations about how to build on the lessons of the past 2 years. The pandemic has been one thing, but what about grappling now with the consequences of war in Ukraine, in which so far 3 million people have had to leave their homes, and with the demands of rebuilding from all these experiences in the future? The report that will argue that we are now entering a more reflective stage, moving from rescue and emergency to building back better, addressing longer term challenges in partnership working. How can we build on practices which were developed of necessity very rapidly in the eye of the storm in the first lockdown and embed them for the longer term? Emergency food relief, food distribution are still needed, but faith groups and local authorities also find themselves working together now over mental health, public health, domestic violence, care and integration of refugees and migrants, mentoring vulnerable families and individuals, emergency fostering and adoption services. The growing use of faith buildings for statutory mental and public health provision is, we think, likely to be permanent. And the report will argue that there are shared values between local authorities and faith groups: compassion, social justice, including determination to end discrimination and poverty, friendship, service, kindness, empathy, hope, and that these shared values enable effective working towards shared outcomes. And it'll set out ideas for how that potential can most effectively be realized with co-creation of projects between local authorities and faith groups rather than just co-production, so that they can take advantage of the moral vision and imagination of faith groups, as well as their impressive capacity to deliver.
Thank you.
So in this still quite new decade, it has been the faith groups which uniquely have had both the motivation and the resources to support their communities during the extraordinary challenges of the past 2 years. Those qualities have not been found on anything like a comparable scale anywhere else. We need to learn the lessons from that, recognize where the resources to change things for the better in our communities can be found in 2022, and enable faith groups and faith-based organizations to make their full contribution. I'm certainly hoping local authorities with such a positive experience of working with faith groups in the pandemic will want to maintain and build on those links for the future. And I hope that all the organizations taking part in this national meeting will be enabled and supported from their unique resources to make their full contribution to the common good in their communities as we address the next set of challenges, whatever they may prove to be in the months ahead. Thank you.
Minister, thank you for joining us. Very much appreciated. I'm not too far from your constituency, I think. I thank you for your thorough remarks and analysis of particular relationship between faith communities and government. I'm relatively newcomer to the Faith Forum. For me, it's been a lifeline being online, because I'm able to join in with these kind of events much more easily. But I do look forward to when we will be back together, hopefully in person, of course, as well. I would certainly concur with what a lot of the minister said in regard to the central role that our faith groups have played in the pandemic response. Aside from, of course, like many in the ministry, I'm sure, I've had to become a health and safety expert when it comes to COVID regulations, which was quite an eye-opener for me. I'm based in Redbridge. I think it's fair to say both in our local Jewish community and the wider faith communities, our organizations have been central to many parts of the pandemic response. And certainly in our local area, the relationship between the local authorities and elected leaders and the faith groups is stronger than ever. We had a lot of collaboration. We had WhatsApp groups with faith leaders and civic leaders talking about whether it was the opening of place of worship, whether it was the response, whether it was the vaccination program, and of course, just providing basic needs for people. In our own community, in our own synagogue, with the very sad closing of our doors at times, the positive is that we've expanded beyond our walls. We've seen a resurgence of volunteering, a restoration of the community and the synagogue as a central focal point, not as a place of worship, but a central hub for support and for giving to others. Of course, social responsibility and community and helping the disadvantaged are core values in my own tradition, my own faith and community. But I think until March 2020, could be we had it a bit too good. We took a lot of things for granted. But since then, between COVID, the current war in Europe, which amongst others has dispersed a number of Jewish communities, and the cost of living crisis certainly have brought to the fore the need for us to be responsive to social needs. It is gratifying to hear that our statutory services are moving towards a more joined up approach to their relationship with faith groups. I can certainly only speak for my own ministry and my own community when I say, of course, I'd like everyone to be more practicing. I'd like everyone to be fully observant and in my own faith, orthodox, as it were. But there are many pillars to what we do. And right now, people's basic physical and material needs are the most vital. And anything we can do to help as a community, both our own faith community and in terms of the wider interfaith community, can only be a good thing. And hopefully, as mentioned, we'll remind people that faith communities have a central part to play in British life and continue to do so. And that partnership with government and with statutory services can only help that. So once again, I thank the gentleman for his comments, for his time. And I think we would all echo the importance of that partnership and those partnerships. And we just hope that they continue to be strengthened. And please God, what we put in place now in times of crisis, be able to rely upon in times of plenty and of good health and of peace as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for your presentation, and Rabbi. So Islington Faiths Forum is just that. It's an interfaith network. We have about 134 faith groups in Islington. We are essentially a second-tier organisation, but also we deliver frontline work. So the frontline work informs the strategic work that we do, and we work a lot with Islington Council. I do actually need to acknowledge Islington Council as they have supported us for a very long time. They have supported us since 2004. And we have core funding, which covers 3.5 to 4 years at a time, which allows us not only to deliver a significant amount of work each year, but also allows us to match fund to grow the work. We work with a lot of different departments within Islington Council. So we work with the VCS team, Fairer Together, community safety, targeted youth support. So we work extensively with them, but we also work with the police. We work with schools, we work with other VCS organisations, and we also work with local businesses and local funders. So as an interfaith forum, we work on universal themes, which is of course what which all brings us together. So the earlier comment about faith groups being a source of leadership, our interfaith network actually is asked to lead on a number of initiatives in the borough, because particularly I would say where the community has lost faith in the statutory agencies to do so, where they need to bring in a neutral party, if you like. So we make a point of being apolitical, and we work hard we've been building relationships of trust, fostering trust for a very long time. And just to give you an idea of the types of work we deliver, we're leading on a community safety project along Blackstock Road at the moment. We have a lead role in the Islington Hate Crime Forum. We work extensively with the Islington Borough Resilience Forum and emergency planning, particularly so during the pandemic. And we were on we still are on the outbreak control boards. We're also leading on women's safety training at the moment. And we're also supporting immigration support. So we really are a second tier organisation, but we also deliver frontline. And as said earlier, that really informs the input we give to the council, because it's the practice that, through practice, we're able to inform the council of local needs, and we're able to develop plans for work around those needs. I would like to talk, Minister spoke earlier about hurdles. I would like to just say something briefly on that. I think a lot of people underestimate the extent to which faith groups and interfaith groups can contribute to the common good. They really do. I think that without doubt, our forum has contributed to local challenges in a way that others wouldn't have been able to. And I would say, without doubt, the council has drawn a lot of benefit through working not only with us, but also with the faith groups that we can bring together to consolidate their response. I'd also like to highlight that we work with the police. We work as a critical friend, and we've had to do that particularly in the last couple of years. And I think it's a delicate balance, but it works. And I would like to say our forum has supported the pandemic efforts to a very great extent, bringing the different faith groups together. A lot of these faith groups have, as I said earlier, provided food, all sorts of responses locally, which have made a huge difference. Yes, so I think it's the work of many faith communities, faith groups, but also the great benefit of having an interfaith forum that can bring those different pieces together and can represent faith communities collectively.